The next delegation is a number of people appearing together with respect to report number 4. So they've allocated their time just in accordance with the 10 minutes. So it's Tom Nesmith, Greg Back, Shelley Sweeney, Michelle Lagasse, Jess Green, Vanda Fleury-Green, Sabrina Janke, and all to be heard with respect to the City of Winnipeg Archives building quarterly update.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm not sure that my video is available. I can't seem to get that to work. Oh, okay, well, here we go. Thank you. Yes, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Tom Nesmith. I'm representing the Association for Manitoba Archives, and thank you for this opportunity to speak to you today. Other speakers are Michelle Lagasse, who is the chair of the Société Historique de Saint-Boniface, Shelley Sweeney, the former head of archives at the University of Manitoba, and filmmakers Jessie Green and Vanda Fleury-Green, and Sabrina Janke, historian and businesswoman. We urge your adoption of the East Kildonan Transcona Community Committee February the 8th motion that's before you today. Our city archives holds a unique, irreplaceable, massive body of records dating from the 1870s. But it languishes in a shabby, obscure, substandard industrial park warehouse. A rainstorm in 2013 damaged its Carnegie Library building home, forcing evacuation of its holdings and staff to the warehouse. The preservation, security, and public accessibility of the archives were dealt a terrible blow. The archive's excellent staff needs a proper building to serve our city as effectively as other major city archives do. The archives is required by legislation to preserve and make accessible city government records and other records created in our community. The city therefore has a legal obligation to provide a proper facility. But we also ask you to adopt this motion to enable the archives to play the exciting role it could have in our city, as the others in our group will discuss. And I turn it over now to Michelle.
Thank you, bonjour. Thank you for your time. I'm going to be very brief in my comments. I want to talk about the records management bylaw as it exists now because it refers to non-city archives. And what I want to say essentially today is that in thinking about how we can bolster and actually improve the condition of the City of Winnipeg archives is that you keep in mind the need that were not created by the city, but are in the keeping of the city right now, and those that could be in the future. Think only of the first 75, 80 years of the history of Winnipeg when the role of government was much smaller than it is right now. What happened, of course, is that people came together, created organizations, created records of their dealings in order to satisfy the needs of Winnipeggers. Think only of health services, education, social services, arts, culture, music, theater, sports, ballet. All these organizations came into being since Winnipeg was created. But where are their records and how can the public have access to them? That's what a city archives is all about. If it is going to be able to tell the story of Winnipeg to present and future generations and basically to the whole world. I can only think of a number of organizations, and so can you, that have had a major role in this city. Let's talk about very quickly the Winnipeg Foundation celebrating its 100th anniversary this year. Where are their records? They've told us publicly, it's on the public record, that they have no place to deposit 100 years of history. Think of all the other organizations one can think of. The Community Chest has become the United Way, a major organization in this city. And of course, we could go on for a long time, but I've made the point. We have all these community organizations with no place to deposit their records. Some of you were kind enough to respond to my invitation to come and visit the Centre du Patrimoine of the St. Boniface Historical Society to see what a modern archives looked like. I can tell you that that building, which was put together in 1998, has been now the recipient of enormous amounts of archival material. In other words, if you build it, they will come. People will deposit with you photographs, recordings, all sorts of records. And also, of course, community organizations have deposited with us a huge number of funds, which we are taking care of and making accessible to the public. I think that's the most exciting possibility there is for the City of Winnipeg right now in rethinking its archives function to open it up to community so that, in fact, we can tell the story of Winnipeg. It's an exciting one. I'm sure you're well aware of that, but we have to do something about the archives so that story can be told. I'm out of time, so I'll leave it at that. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much. Seeing no other questions, thank you very much for your time. I know that I've been in contact with all of you, and I know you're very passionate about our archives, and I just want to thank you for that, because you know, it plays a very important role in the City of Winnipeg. So I just want to thank you. Oh, Councillor.
Okay, and I just want to thank all of you for your hard work. As you know, I toured it, and you know, my kid was telling me the other day, he was researching some family history, and he said to me, "Oh, Mom, I went down to this really divey building. It was really horrible." And he was telling about it. And I'm like, "Oh, that's the City Archives building. We're working on fixing that." So thank you very much for your presentation today. Thank you. Big supporters here.
I'll just add, obviously, we've had quite a few conversations. And I acknowledge all the effort that you've put into this. How have your conversations and ongoing discussions with the public service been? I know we've got a new person in that area and such. Are you pleased with the way it's going?
Not quite sure what you mean, Councillor Klein. We certainly have had discussions with the city archivist and records manager and the city clerk. And the city clerk has long been, and his predecessor has long been, a friend of the City Archives. As you may know, the City Archives got off to a tremendous positive start in the 1990s. And with the dedication of the Carnegie Library building to the City Archives, the Carnegie Library building was in renovation to be a proper home for the archives. And then a torrential rainstorm struck in 2013 that tore through the roof of the building while it was under renovation, forced the total evacuation of the archives materials and the staff to this industrial park. So the city had made a tremendous commitment to the city archives. This is bolstered in legislation, the charter of the city, the Municipal Act of the province, Freedom of Information Protection and Privacy Act, which is administered by the City Archives for the municipality, for our municipality of Winnipeg, and the Records Management Bylaw. So we have a good legal foundation, although we're somewhat concerned, as Michelle has said, about how broad that mandate for the City Archives is, and we would like it to be a broader one to embrace community-created records. But to come to your point, on the whole, we think we have had a fair hearing from our public service. We think they are an outstanding staff at the archives. They do a tremendous job. They've soldiered on despite 8 years of being sidelined in many respects in this industrial park warehouse. They have nevertheless tried to do the best they can in this situation. And unfortunately, public use of the archives has dropped rather dramatically. And we're concerned that the inadequate location and poor facility that's been given to the archives is just totally inadequate, as everyone agrees, and the public service agrees with this as well. Everyone agrees this is an inadequate, substandard facility. It was never designed for archival purposes, and it's time to move out of that facility. And we think this motion that you have before us from the East Skeldona Transcona Community Committee is a big step in the right direction toward moving us toward a proper home for the City Archives.
Excellent.
We do have a couple of other speakers, however. I hope they haven't been overlooked, because I know they've been waiting as well.
Yeah, we have 27 delegates today, so we'll eventually get to everybody, but we have a long list of people to speak.
Okay.
The group on the screen with Tom, they all registered as one delegation.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
Yeah.
So I believe they have just 5 minutes left on their time.
Okay, you still have 5 minutes if you have others that haven't spoken yet.
Yes. Yeah. It's Shelley Sweeney. Hello?
Hi, we can hear you.
Okay. Well, I'll start then. Well, as you know, that the 150th anniversary of the city is coming up in 2024, and the selection of a permanent, stable, and most importantly, accessible facility for the City of Winnipeg Archives is really critical, and it could make a really positive contribution to the celebrations in 2024. I mean, it was one of the things that the council had done, the first council had done, was to secure the records of the city. And so I think that this could be a really signature part of the celebrations. The needs assessment that was done by the consultant, what we see moving this process forward is to have that report released and a public consultation done with that, because there are key decisions that need to be made in order to know what is the best solution for the archives. So basically, we would say that the city has a unique historic identity. It's one that's rooted in Indigenous people and who were originally here. And I think that we have a real opportunity to make Winnipeg, through the provision of these resources, to give people pride and as a source of inspiration, and to elevate Winnipeg's standing in the world. So I would now pass over to Jesse and Vanda.
Hi, I'm Jesse, and I'm owner of STRONGFRONT.tv, a local Indigenous media production company. I have been in film since 1996, and I'm committed to sharing the voices of First Nation and Métis people through the lens of resiliency. Archives are part of our institutional identity. We call it story work, and it brings a deeper meaning to our films. The city archives are important to me because we use them to support Indigenous narratives. I am an off-reserve member of Shoal Lake 40, and it helped me to understand the complexities of my community. I didn't know the depths of documentation that existed until 2015, when we started production on a local documentary, Urban Eclipse, Rising Tides of Kikikozibi. The film explores the city's connection to Shoal Lake 40, the community that was displaced by its thirst for water. From the Greater Winnipeg Water District Archives alone, we showcased 51 photos, images, and maps, 29 from Winnipeg in Focus, and 22 from GWWD. We held the first screening at Shoal Lake 40, and people were excited to have visual access to the construction of the aqueduct, and like me, most had no idea the collection even existed. My journey mirrors that of fellow Winnipeggers too, learning about our hometown and our collective history. The film screened across Canada, and much of the positive feedback is around the use of archives.
Hi there, I'm Vanda fleury-green, archival producer for Urban Eclipse and StrongFront. Our time inside the archives was an experience. Being hands-on with the ledgers and boxes was meaningful to both of us. A proper archival facility is desperately needed for user access and for ongoing preservation of these important materials. As Indigenous people, we were able to use the city archives as tools of empowerment. As a Métis woman whose homelands extend throughout Red River, they were also touchstones for my memory and identity. These experiences prompted us to bring together Indigenous youth and archives to build their skills around record literacy. One of the classroom activities was exploring water as a social justice issue, then presenting the story through a collage of old newspaper clippings from the city archives. So I would like to see other Indigenous people engage the collections too, and to know that they will be available to the next generation, including our 3 young children. I hope the doors of an appropriate facility will be open to them. Advancing reconciliation is timely and important, as are the active role archives play according to the TRC's 94 calls to action, and reflecting on the more recent Welcoming Winnipeg, reconciling our history policy. Though archives are not as visible as street names or monuments, they too inform the histories we remember. The current location is disappointing because it puts them even further from our collective consciousness, limiting access and the potential for these important discussions. Thank you.
Great. That was really great. And you have 10 seconds on the clock too. So that was perfect timing.
We do have one more short presentation from Sabrina Janke, if you do have time for that, please.
Okay.
Minutes for that.
3 minutes on the clock?
Yes.
Okay, thanks.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for extending your time for me. I really appreciate it. For those who maybe don't know who I am, my name is Sabrina Janke. I am a historian in Winnipeg. I was the tour guide manager with the Exchange District Biz for 4 years, so I researched and developed tours for them, and I'm presently the co-host and co-producer of a Winnipeg history podcast called One Great History. I've also done tours for the Winnipeg Architecture Foundation, Heritage Winnipeg, and a number of others over the years, so suffice to say, I use the archives a lot. Due to COVID restrictions, this has mostly been online now, or relegated to secondary sources. But the thing with that is, even if I'm using a book, a City of Winnipeg historic report, an article from the MHS, anything like that still is drawing from the city archives. In fact, most roads for me will lead me back down to the city archives. Through this, I've been able to tell stories about hockey in Winnipeg, old vaudeville theaters, fascism in the 1930s, and countless other things over the past 5 years. And there's a lot more I'd like to cover, especially as Manitoba's 150th, or Winnipeg's 150th draws near. And it isn't just me using these sources. There's at least 3 dedicated tour companies in Winnipeg, 2 national historic sites that do programming, multiple biz zones that offer walking tours, and over 20 museums, big and small, that all will also use the archives to help educate the public. So it's not a small industry in this city, and there is a real demand for historic content in Winnipeg. My last summer with the Exchange Biz would have been in 2019, and we saw something like 3,000 tour guests in one summer alone. Even the podcast I currently host, which is about 6 months old at this point, has had about 1,200 episode downloads. For context, we have about 7 episodes, and an average podcast will see around 26 episode downloads. So there is a significant demand for historic content in Winnipeg, and it's not just from Winnipeggers. We've had people listening from Barbados, from Ireland, from Russia. There are people who are curious about the history of this city. And Winnipeg has a complicated and rich history that we should be talking about, but we need the archives to play a role in that conversation. With that being said, what we need and what we deserve is an archive that is accessible to the public, that has the capacity to care for its documents and to grow, and has the space to welcome researchers, students, tour groups, and anyone else who's curious about our city's history. And it would also help make my job easier. Thank you so much.
Great. Well, thank you again for coming in delegation and all your advocacy work. We need people like you championing this, because archives are very, very valuable to our city. So thank you all again.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.